Welcome back to the Glory of Growth podcast. This is episode 3, and in today's episode, we are going to be discussing positive thinking. Has positive thinking expired? In this episode, I'm going to be talking about my experience with positive thinking, and then also the mainstream understanding of it and why it's been shunned, why society has all of a sudden had a change of thoughts, a change of hearts about such a powerful concept which was helping so many people. I got into positive thinking about almost 10 years ago now. It was actually through Gary Vee. I remember I was 17, I was in A-levels, and I remember listening to one of his podcasts, and I was following him on Instagram. A lot of the stuff he was talking about back then didn't make any sense to me. I was like, what do you mean gratitude is happiness? I didn't understand any of it, okay? But he spoke a lot about positive thinking, and he spoke about how you can change your thoughts and have a different experience of life. And I was like, that's interesting. So I just started to implement some of these ideas. And I realized that, this is actually really cool. I can take my thoughts and I can decide that today there's one specific thing. I don't want to think negatively about it. I don't want to think negatively about the fact that it's raining today. And in fact, let's look at it in a positive light. And that's what I started doing. I found it quite powerful. Since then, it seems like in the last 5 years or so, the idea of positive thinking, it gets knocked a lot. It seems like there is a lot of negative connotation around positive thinking, and many people kind of stay away from it now. Even you hear a lot of in like marketing, especially in the self-development place, in the self-development space, you hear a lot about how certain people will be marketing their product, their service, or they'll be given like a speech in front of an audience, and they'll talk about how what they're doing isn't positive thinking, and they will basically talk down towards positive thinking. And I see that a lot and I hear that a lot, and I've been very curious as to why that is. What I realized with positive thinking is that in the last 5 to 10 years, this concept has become quite mainstream. A lot of people know about it, and what happens when the masses find out about something is that the ideology or what the thing represents or the depth gets diluted. Because the more people know about it, the understanding of that topic becomes the average of what people know and what people understand. And the average person isn't going to dive deep into the understanding because it's just what they hear, it's just what they know. So I've noticed that when more people, this is the pattern that you realize actually, when things become cliche, it's because more people know about it. But I always reverse psychology that, and I think to myself, okay, if more people know about this, there must be a reason why that is. Why is it that this is all of a sudden a cliche thing? And a lot of the times when you go deeper into it, you realize that the thing in itself, in this case, positive thinking, does actually have a lot of value and it is quite powerful. But just because we hear about it so much, the meaning has become redundant and it's lost its depth. Because I think about, in order for something like positive thinking, in order for that to be a powerful concept, you need to understand it past the surface level, which is what most people understand. And then people will go out and try what they know about it, which is at a very surface level, and using the very limited experience based on the very limited data points and information they have about it, they will come back and say it doesn't work because they didn't have the information. I don't think anyone's to blame here. I just think it's how things unfold over time. But I think it's important to have awareness of what something means and what it represents and how it can be used at a deeper level, or how it can be understood at a deeper level at least. Another reason why positive thinking has lost its value or its power is because as more and more people find out about it, people will interpret it and then regurgitate that information based on their own understanding, based on their own perspective and their own experience and their own self-awareness. And everyone has a different level of self-awareness, a different depth of self-awareness. And that is going to impact how other people hear about it from people who do know about it, because they're only going to hear a very specific side of it from a very specific individual experience and not the objective representation of what that idea actually is or what it means. To me, positive thinking is this idea that, like I mentioned at the start, you can take something which is a negative thing and you can decide that instead of this thought, I'm going to replace it with a positive charge. It all comes down to emotional charge. I'm going to replace this negative charge and I'm going to replace it with a positive charge. And that's then going to affect how I process this information, which is then going to affect and change how I have this experience. So ultimately, to break it down into a single sentence, positive thinking changes how you experience reality. That's all it is. And I think that's really powerful. So yeah, I think people will regurgitate that information based on their level of awareness, which is quite limited because they didn't take the time to understand what it actually means and what it represents and the impact that it can have and the deeper mechanics of it in the first place. So everyone is just spreading a limited, very surface, vague information about this and what it means. Another reason why I think that positive thinking gets knocked a lot is because on one hand, you have people who have a limited self-awareness and they don't understand what it actually is. So they're not able to experience the full positive effects of it. And on the other hand, I feel like there is a deepening understanding of the self, of self-consciousness and the self-image, right? And there's so many layers to this. Even though relatively this demographic of people is quite small, but it is a rapidly growing one as well. And as that demographic of people who have a deeper understanding, a deeper self-concept, and as you go into the different layers, there are so many layers to the self. I can't remember all of them, but I asked ChatGPT before this very briefly, and you have the biological self, and then you have the mental self, and then you got the nervous system, and then it goes quite deep, and it depends on how much you want to go into spirituality and the soul, and then beyond that. So the point is that there's lots of level to self-development, which are now being opened up. Like 10 years ago, a lot of stuff that is being spoken about today, like shadow work and healing, these weren't buzzwords at the time because people didn't understand these concepts and they weren't very popular either. But now, most of us hear these words on a regular, maybe even a daily basis, meaning, and it shows how the demographic has changed. Point I'm trying to make is that people are realizing that self-development is a much deeper, holistic approach, and there's many, many different layers to it. And so on the other hand, you have these people who are realizing that positive thinking actually is quite shallow, and it touches mostly, and it points mostly towards the mental and emotional layers of the mind, of the psyche, of the self, whatever you want to call it. And by the way, I am also of the belief, or at least I ended up believing, that positive thinking has also become quite a bleh concept. It's become quite mundane. It's become quite shallow and vague. The point I am at now, for the last year and a half, I've really been diving deep into manifestation and understanding the deeper mechanics behind it. Looking back now, I see that a massive part of my entire journey was actually built on the blocks of positive thinking, because it was the first time I was able to experience how a thought can change reality. I wasn't able to articulate it this simply and this well at the time, but that is essentially what I was doing. Looking back now, I can see that's what I was doing. And now that I'm understanding manifestation, which is actually like the new positive thinking, personal development buzzword equivalent, I realize that manifestation is actually pretty much the exact same thing as positive thinking. There's just a deeper level to it, which is the small distinction of, with manifestation, at least the understanding of it which I have, which from my experience and from what I've heard and seen, this is the true definition of what manifestation is. It's about the emotional charge that you feel of a desired outcome and not lying to yourself about the desired outcome, meaning that it's not just about what you say, which you could argue is positive thinking. And by the way, affirmations also falls into the same bracket as well. It's all the same shit, because affirmation is like the middle. Affirmations is like the crossover between, it's the Venn diagram middle part between positive thinking and manifestation. Affirmation sits in the middle part because it's, I have £1 billion, or I am beautiful. I'm using very, very trite examples, but you get the point. because it is just positive thinking. With manifestation, the only distinction is that there has to be a positive charge, because if you are trying to manifest something and the emotional charge that you have is coming from a different reality, maybe it's coming from your current reality and not from the reality of where you want to be, then that is the reality that you will manifest. And I think that is where positive thinking, maybe, if you don't go into it deep enough, is where it lacks the depth, because this idea of positive thinking, it just says you have to think positively and that's going to change your life. And even though there is truth in that, it's not the full truth, and it's not the full picture. If anything, I think that positive thinking is actually a summarized, or at least a summary of the initial steps of manifestation itself, because you cannot get to understanding how manifestation works if you are not able to, at the very basic level, realize that your current thoughts, which are more likely or most likely going to be negative thoughts, if you can't realize that your current thoughts are not the thoughts which will give you the reality that you want to achieve. And going back to what I said about holistic self-development and realizing that there are so many layers to the self, once you take that step one, you then go, okay, if these thoughts are not the thoughts that are going to get me to where I want to go, what are the thoughts that are going to get me to where I want to go? And then you start positive thinking. And then you go to the deeper levels of manifestation, which is understanding the emotional charge, where your current emotional charge of your current thoughts, where that comes from. And then also then being able to produce the emotional charge of the reality that you want to manifest. But then in order to do that, you have to have the belief and conviction that you are somebody who deserves that reality. You are somebody who deserves that abundance, love, happiness, prosperity, whatever the case might be. And then from there, you go deeper into stuff like shadow work, because you go, okay, do I believe that I deserve these things? Do I believe I'm capable of these things? Do I believe that it's worth it? Do I believe that I am someone who can have these things? And then you go into figuring out why you don't believe those things, what caused you to not believe these things, and then you go into shadow work, and then that's where it goes deeper. But the reason why I'm talking about this is because I believe that positive thinking is a really powerful concept, and it is something which changed my life. And I do not believe that it's something which should be shunned, and I do think that it should be something that is trendy only if people are willing to put a little more effort into understanding the deeper mechanics behind it, which is, it's not enough by itself. There has to be a deeper layer of self-awareness which needs to come with it, and a deeper layer of wanting change and understanding why you are or are not capable, worthy, or deserving of having that change. To simplify it, you have to understand the deeper mechanics of positive thinking, which is saying the thing or having the positive thought in itself is not enough. You need to start thinking about the emotional charge that goes with it, whether it's negative or positive, and then ask why. That is how I would summarize it. Because the truth is that positive thinking is actually a magnificent skill. It is an important skill, and this actually also applies if you're a professional and in a working environment, or even if it's not for personal development reasons, it's still a very powerful skill to have, and it's not an easy one either. And I do still believe that, once again, even though there are many, many more people who are on the self-development journey who understand these deeper concepts and deeper levels of consciousness and self-awareness and manifestation and all of these amazing things, it's still a very, very small demographic. And once again, it is a rapidly growing one, but I believe that if we do bring back something like positive thinking now, at a time where all of these ideas of healing and self-development are going mainstream, I think it can have a massive impact. And I also think people need it. I think especially right now, there is so much happening in the world. There is so much negativity. I don't watch the news. I stay away from it as far as possible. But some things you can't avoid. Some things will always leak through. And just the very few things that I'm aware of, and from what I hear from other people, I'm aware that there is so much happening in the world. It always has been. But especially right now, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of uncertainty about the future. There's always uncertainty about the future. That's not a new thing. But things feel more fragile right now. And I think at this time, this is where we need something like positive thinking to be a trendy topic again, because just small shifts a day in how people think, how people decide to go about their day, and how they choose to experience life can change how they experience life. And then you never know who that might inspire, what that might lead to, the chain of effects that might lead to, and the impact that can have on a wider scale. So that was my short rant on positive thinking, my thoughts and beliefs about it, and if it's been banned or not. And it seems like it has been banned, but I believe we should bring it back. Thank you for listening to the Glory of Growth podcast. If anything in here resonated with you, or you think that someone needs to hear it, I would highly appreciate that you share it with them, because like I said earlier, you don't know who might need it. On that note, I hope you have a great day, and remember, wherever you are, whoever you are, there are things out there waiting for you so great that you don't even know to ask for. Lots of love, Jotty.